What if I told you the most beautiful tomb in Egypt doesn't belong to a pharaoh? Imagine walking into a narrow valley on the western side of the Nile. Nothing here prepares you for what is waiting beneath the ground. You begin walking down a staircase cut into the mountain. Then, slowly, the darkness gives way to color. Deep blue ceilings filled with golden stars, white-robed gods, protective cobras, falcon-headed spirits, hieroglyphs painted in black, red, green, yellow, and blue. And everywhere you look, the same woman appears, standing before the gods, playing a mysterious board game, making offerings, being guided through the world of the dead. This is not the tomb of a pharaoh. It belongs to a queen. Her name was Nefertari. Okay. I know the name Queen Nefertari probably makes you think of the famous Queen Nefertiti, right? But don't mix them up. A lot of articles and videos actually do, but they were two completely different women. In our previous episodes, we explored the beautiful and incredibly mysterious Queen Nefertiti. And now, it's time for Queen Nefertari. Ready? All right, my friends. Let's dive in. And more than 3,000 years after her death, her tomb is still considered one of the greatest surviving masterpieces of ancient Egyptian painting. But who was she? Why did Ramses II give her such an extraordinary place in Egyptian art? And does this tomb really prove that she was the great love of his life? Let's go back to the beginning. The queen people keep confusing with Nefertiti. First, let's clear up the name. Nefertari was not Nefertiti. Nefertiti lived during the 18th dynasty and was the wife of Akhenaten. Nefertari lived later during the 19th dynasty and was the wife of Ramses II. They were two completely different women, separated by generations. Nefertari's full name is often written as Nefertari Merenmut or Meretmut in some modern spellings. A conventional translation is beautiful companion, beloved of Mut. Mut was a major Egyptian goddess, especially connected with the religious world of Thebes, but almost everything about Nefertari's early life remains unknown. We do not know exactly when she was born. We do not know who her parents were. We cannot securely identify her birthplace, and no surviving inscription gives us the story of how she met Ramses. That absence matters. Popular documentaries often fill these gaps with romance, secret bloodlines, or imagined court drama. The surviving evidence does not allow that. Nefertari enters history already close to the future king. By the beginning of Ramses II's reign, she held the title Great Royal Wife, the principal queen at court. Museums and surviving monuments consistently identify her as one of the most prominent queens associated with Ramses II. Ramesses II ruled Egypt for more than 6 decades during the 13th century BCE. His image appeared across Egypt and Nubia. He built temples, raised colossal statues, recorded military campaigns, and carved his name onto monuments on a scale few rulers could match. He also had several royal wives and a very large family. So simply being married to Ramesses did not automatically guarantee that a woman would dominate the monuments. But Nefertari did. Her name and image appear at important sites. She is shown participating in royal and religious ceremonies. She appears beside Ramesses not merely as decoration, but as an active ritual figure. But perhaps the clearest public statement of her status stands hundreds of kilometers south of Egypt's traditional heartland. Do you know where? Yeah, at Abu Simbel. Today, most people know Abu Simbel because of the enormous seated statues of Ramses II. But beside the king's great temple stands a second monument, smaller but in some ways more surprising. It was dedicated to the goddess Hathor and to Nefertari. This temple was carved directly into the rock during the reign of Ramses II. Official heritage documentation identifies it as the Temple of Queen Nefertari, while scholarly and conservation institutions describe its dedication to Hathor and the Queen's elevated sacred role. Look at the facade. 6 colossal standing figures dominate it. 4 represent Ramses, 2 represent Nefertari, and the Queen is shown on a monumental scale beside the king. That is important. Egyptian art usually expressed hierarchy through size. Kings were normally shown larger than queens, officials, enemies, and ordinary people. At the small temple of Abu Simbel, however, Nefertari is granted an unusually powerful visual presence. This does not make her a co-pharaoh. It does not prove that she ruled Egypt, but it tells every person approaching the temple that she was no ordinary royal wife. Inside, her relationship with Hathor becomes even stronger. Here's the surprising part. Abu Simbel is not just one temple, it's actually 2. The enormous one with 4 seated statues is the Great Temple of Ramses II, while the temple in this photo, with 6 standing figures carved into the rock, is the smaller temple dedicated to Queen Nefertari and the goddess Hathor. 4 of those statues represent Ramses II, and 2 represent Nefertari. And unusually, the queen is shown almost the same size as the king, which tells us just how important she was. Hathor was connected with motherhood, music, sexuality, kingship, the sky, and the western realm of the dead. Nefertari could be associated visually and ritually with the goddess. In a political landscape near Egypt's southern frontier, the monument celebrated the king, the queen, divine protection, and royal authority all at once. So was it only a love monument? Probably not. Ancient Egyptian royal monuments almost never had only one purpose. They could express devotion, politics, theology, dynasty, and power at the same time. But the fact remains, Ramses gave Nefertari a monumental temple beside his own. That alone places her among the most visibly honored queens of ancient Egypt. Nefertari was not only a face carved beside her husband. Evidence also connects her with international royal communication. A surviving letter written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language used between major Near Eastern courts, was sent in her name to Pudu-Hepa, queen of the Hittite Empire. In this correspondence, the 2 royal women address one another in the language of diplomatic sisterhood. The letter belongs to the wider relationship between Egypt and Hatti after years of conflict and the eventual peace between the 2 powers. This does not mean Nefertari personally controlled foreign policy. We should not turn one letter into a modern political biography, but it does show that she had a recognized place within royal diplomacy and that her identity mattered beyond Egypt's borders. For a woman whose childhood is almost completely invisible to us, that is remarkable. What's really amazing is that one of Nefertari's letters actually survived. It was found at the Hittite capital of Hattusa, written in Akkadian on a clay tablet. We can't say Nefertari wrote it herself. It was almost certainly written by royal scribes in her name, but in the letter, she and Queen Pudu-Hepa call each other sister, which wasn't about family. It was the formal language of royal diplomacy back then. At some point during the reign of Ramesses II, Nefertari vanishes from the surviving record. We do not have a document telling us exactly when she died. We do not have an ancient account of her final illness. We do not know how old she was. Some scholars have tried to estimate the timing from the monuments where she appears and then stops appearing, but the evidence does not give us an exact death date. This is where the story becomes quiet. One of Egypt's most visible queens suddenly becomes silent. But beneath the cliffs of western Thebes, a monument was being prepared for her final transformation. Not a palace, not another public temple, a tomb. Modern archaeologists call it QV66. QV means Valley of the Queens. The number is simply its modern archaeological designation. The tomb was found in 1904 by an Italian archaeological mission led by Ernesto Schiaparelli, then director of the Egyptian Museum in Turin, today the Museo Egizio. The museum still preserves objects discovered in and associated with the burial. But when the excavators entered, they did not find an untouched royal burial. Ancient robbers had already been there. Most of the valuable burial equipment had disappeared. The sarcophagus had been broken. The mummy was gone, or at least no complete, securely identified body remained. A pair of human legs was among the remains discovered in the tomb. A modern multidisciplinary study concluded that they were compatible with an adult woman of the correct general period and could plausibly belong to Nefertari. But the identification cannot be treated as absolutely certain. That distinction is important. People sometimes say, "We have found Nefertari's mummy." The scientific evidence does not justify saying that with complete certainty. What survived beyond doubt was something else. The walls. Nefertari's tomb contains roughly 520 square meters of painted decoration. The images were not painted directly onto perfect rock. The limestone in the Valley of the Queens was fractured and unsuitable for fine painting. Workers had to prepare it with layers of plaster. The artists then created a smooth surface, outlined figures and hieroglyphs, and painted them in brilliant pigments. The result is one of the finest surviving painted environments from Pharaonic Egypt. The ceilings are deep blue and covered with yellow stars. The background of many walls is a bright, almost luminous white. Against it, gods appear in controlled blocks of color. Skin, linen, jewelry, feathers, wigs, crowns, and hieroglyphs are all carefully separated. Nefertari herself appears again and again. She wears long, transparent linen garments. Her hair is covered by an elaborate wig. She wears jewelry and royal insignia. But these are not ordinary portraits from her life. Every scene belongs to a ritual journey. The tomb does not tell us how she met Ramses. It does not show a royal wedding. It does not show the private life of the palace. Instead, it shows what was supposed to happen after she died. The tomb is not a love letter on the wall. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings about QV66. People enter expecting a biography of Ramses and Nefertari. But Ramses is absent from the major religious journey painted inside her tomb. Nefertari approaches the gods herself. She stands before Isis. She is guided by divine figures. She worships Osiris. She faces Thoth. She interacts directly with the sacred world. The Metropolitan Museum has noted that this direct interaction with deities reflects her elevated royal status. The tomb is therefore not mainly about being the wife of Ramses. It is about Nefertari becoming an effective, regenerated being in the afterlife. The queen must pass through death. She must gain protection. She must receive divine recognition. She must be transformed. And the paintings help make that transformation possible. The Book of the Dead on the walls. Many of the texts and scenes in the tomb come from the collection modern scholars call the Book of the Dead. This was not one fixed book. It was a flexible body of funerary spells and images designed to protect and transform the deceased. In Nefertari's tomb, selected chapters appear across the walls as part of a carefully designed visual program. Getty's conservation publications describe the hieroglyphic texts and images as tools intended to ensure her regeneration and safety in the afterlife. One scene shows Nefertari playing Senet. Senet was an ancient Egyptian board game, but in funerary imagery, the game carried deeper meaning. The queen sits before the board, apparently playing against an invisible opponent. The image belongs to a passage connected with movement, transformation, and freedom in the world beyond death. The Metropolitan Museum identifies the scene as Nefertari playing Senet in the afterlife. The point is not simply that she enjoyed board games. Inside a tomb, the game becomes part of the passage between worlds. Where is the famous weighing of the heart? Here is a surprising fact. Although Nefertari's tomb uses material from the Book of the Dead, the famous complete judgment scene, the heart weighed against the feather of Maat, is not shown there. Chapter 125 and its full tribunal scene do not appear in the tomb. Maat is present through other imagery and ideas, but the familiar courtroom composition is absent. Getty's detailed study of the tomb explicitly notes this. That tells us something important. Egyptian tomb programs were selective. Not every deceased person received every spell. Not every famous scene had to appear. Nefertari's tomb presents a carefully chosen route through transformation, divine contact, and rebirth. Her tomb nearly lost its paintings. The modern discovery of QV66 was not the end of the story. It created a new danger. The paintings were extremely fragile. Salt, moisture, unstable plaster, ancient geological fractures, dust, and human visitation all threatened them. Large sections had already begun separating from the rock. Between 1986 and 1992, the Getty Conservation Institute worked with Egyptian antiquities authorities on a major conservation project. The goal was not to repaint the tomb until it looked new. Conservators stabilized the original plaster and paint, cleaned surfaces carefully, and used treatments designed to preserve rather than replace the ancient work. Monitoring also examined temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, and the effect of visitors inside the tomb. This is why access has often been restricted. A human body entering a small chamber changes its environment. Heat rises, moisture increases, carbon dioxide accumulates. In a normal room, that means nothing. Inside a 3,000-year-old painted tomb, it matters. Now we return to the question, why did Ramesses II create such an extraordinary tomb for Nefertari? The honest answer is, no surviving document gives us one simple reason. There is no papyrus saying, "I built this because she was the only woman I ever loved." But the monuments give us strong evidence. Nefertari was his great royal wife. She appeared prominently in royal ritual. She had a temple at Abu Simbel connected with Hathor. She participated in international correspondence. Her burial received one of the most sophisticated decorative programs known from the Valley of the Queens. Together, these facts show exceptional royal status. They may also reflect genuine personal affection. The language used around royal couples can contain affection, beauty, and praise. But royal monuments were never private Valentine cards. They were public theology. They were political statements. They were machines for eternity. Ramesses was not only honoring a wife, he was defining Nefertari's place in the divine order. At Abu Simbel, she stood beside him before the living world. In Q566, she stood alone before the gods of the dead. Ramses II had several wives during his long reign, and Egypt had known many queens before Nefertari. Yet she received an honor that very few royal women ever did. An entire rock-cut temple dedicated to Hathor and to herself, standing beside one of the greatest monuments of ancient Egypt. Now here's where things become really interesting. If you look carefully at the facade, you'll notice that Nefertari's colossal statues are almost the same height as Ramses. That might not sound extraordinary today, but in ancient Egyptian art, size was never random. Kings were normally shown larger than everyone else. Making the queen nearly equal in scale was an exceptional artistic decision, and Egyptologists see it as a powerful statement about her status at court. Does that prove Ramesses loved her more than anyone else? No. And this is where we have to be careful. Ancient Egyptian kings didn't leave behind personal diaries. We don't have letters where Ramesses says, "I love Nefertari." We don't have poems written in his own hand describing his feelings. Those simply haven't survived, or perhaps they never existed. What we do have are monuments, and monuments were how Egyptian kings spoke to the future. One royal inscription associated with Nefertari includes a remarkable phrase, often translated as, "the one for whom the sun shines." It's one of the most quoted lines connected with her. Was it meant as poetry? A formal royal compliment? A theological statement? Scholars don't completely agree on how we should interpret its tone, but everyone agrees on one thing. It is an unusually warm expression to find in an official royal monument. Then there is the tomb. Ramesses built temples across Egypt. He built colossal statues of himself. He filled the Nile Valley with his name. Yet when it came to Nefertari's burial, the result was something extraordinary. Her tomb, known today as QV66, is considered by many Egyptologists to be the finest painted tomb in the Valley of the Queens. Not because it is the largest, not because it is filled with gold, but because of the breathtaking quality of its paintings, their colors, and the sophistication of the religious program covering its walls. Does that mean Ramesses built it purely out of love? Again, we can't honestly say that. Royal monuments in ancient Egypt were never just personal. They were political, religious, dynastic. They projected power as much as emotion. But when you place all the evidence side by side, a temple beside his own, monumental statues that elevate her above almost every other queen, exceptional royal titles, diplomatic correspondence bearing her name, and one of the greatest royal tombs ever created, it becomes very difficult to argue that Nefertari was simply one queen among many. Maybe we'll never know exactly what Ramesses felt. History is rarely that generous. But 3,000 years later, we can still walk through the monuments he left behind. And whether they speak of love, honor, politics, or all three at once, they still speak of Nefertari. Subscribe to Art.Timeline, and let's continue our journey through the history of art.